He was too small. In June of 1942, a 16-year-old boy standing just 5'5" and weighing only 110 lb walked into a U.S. Marine recruiting office. The recruiter didn't even look up from his desk. He just laughed. The Navy, they rejected him as too small. The Army paratroopers. They told him to go home and grow up. This boy was a walking fatal flaw. He was the P-38 that couldn't turn. By every military standard, he was useless. But the recruiters had made a fatal mistake. They saw a boy. They didn't see the weapon that poverty had created. They didn't see the eyes of a hunter who had been keeping his family from starvation for 5 years. This boy's name was Audie Murphy. And in 30 months, this too small reject would become a one-man army who would single-handedly destroy an entire German company by climbing onto a burning tank that was seconds from exploding. The story doesn't begin on the battlefield. It begins in the crushing poverty of the cotton fields of Hunt County, Texas. Audie was the 6th of 12 children. His father, an impoverished sharecropper, abandoned the family. His mother died of pneumonia just after Audie turned 16. Suddenly, this 100 lb boy was the head of the family, the only provider for his younger siblings. His primary tool, a .22 rifle. His motivation, starvation. A neighbor later recalled Murphy's uncanny marksmanship. The boy could drop a running rabbit at 50 yards with a rifle most people couldn't hit a barn with. Murphy's own words were colder. "If I don't hit what I shoot at, my family doesn't eat tonight." This wasn't practice. This was survival. Every bullet cost money the family didn't have. Every miss meant empty stomachs. Under that pressure, Audie Murphy didn't just learn to shoot. He learned to kill. He developed a shooter's eye. A cold efficiency that would one day terrify German soldiers across 3 countries. When Pearl Harbor was attacked, Murphy saw his chance. The Army meant steady pay, 3 meals a day, and money to send home, but he was still 16, still underweight. After being laughed out of every other office, he went to the regular Army infantry. The recruiter looked at the forged affidavit from his sister, claiming he was 18. He looked at the boy who looked more like 14. He sighed and stamped the papers. The U.S. Army had no idea what it had just done. It had just accepted a field modification that would save hundreds of American lives by breaking all the rules. Private First Class David Mauser, who trained with Murphy, recalled, "We all thought he was a mascot. The drill sergeants rode him mercilessly, called him baby. But then they got to the rifle range. Those baby blue eyes went cold as winter. He never missed, not once." In July 1943, Company B, 15th Infantry Regiment landed in Sicily. In the mountains, Murphy's hidden truth was finally unleashed. His rural upbringing meant he moved silently. He used terrain. He shot with deadly cold accuracy. Near Palermo, his unit was pinned by a German machine gun. This was his first problem. The doctrine said, "Wait for support." Murphy's doctrine said, "My family doesn't eat." While the others took cover, Private Murphy, the 100 lb baby, used the terrain to work his way around the enemy position alone. He eliminated the entire crew with grenades. Then, in a move that would define his career, he turned their own machine gun on the retreating forces. Captain Paul Harris recommended him for a Bronze Star, writing, "This soldier displays a natural aptitude for combat that is extraordinary." Extraordinary was an understatement. Audie Murphy had just discovered something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He was exceptionally good at killing. Sicily was just the beginning. The Italian campaign is where Murphy transformed from a good soldier into a walking nightmare for the Wehrmacht. At the Volo River in October 1943, his squad was decimated by a German counterattack. Instead of retreating, Murphy grabbed a borrowed sniper rifle and held the position single-handedly. 5 German soldiers killed at over 300 yards. He was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest medal in the Army. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a force. Staff Sergeant William Polson described Murphy's method. Murph didn't fight angry. That's what was terrifying about him. He fought cold, calculated, like he was doing arithmetic. See a German, eliminate the German, move to the next German. No emotion, no hesitation, just deadly efficiency. Then came Onyo, the blood-soaked beachhead Churchill called the Wildat. The problem, a German tank, the one thing infantry fears most. Murphy didn't just fire his bazooka. He crawled towards the tank using the terrain until he was at point-blank range. He destroyed the German tank completely. He was awarded his first Silver Star. He had survived Sicily, Salerno, Anzio, and Rome. He'd been wounded. He'd been promoted to sergeant. The too small farm boy now had a reputation that preceded him. But in August 1944 came the test that changed everything. Near Monty-le-Mar, France, his platoon was ambushed. The problem, his lieutenant, his commander was killed in the opening volley. The chain of command was broken. Sergeant Murphy didn't wait for orders. He became the order. He took command of the platoon. The situation was impossible. 18 Americans against a German company of over 100. For 2 hours, Sergeant Murphy held a critical crossroads. He directed his men, exposed himself to fire, and personally accounted for 15 enemy dead. He held the line. The Army, finally realizing what it had, gave him a battlefield commission. On October 14, 1944, the kid, who was too small to enlist, was now Second Lieutenant Audie Murphy. But combat has a price. By January 1945, Murphy was no longer the 16-year-old kid. He was 19, but he looked 40. He had seen almost every one of his original friends killed or wounded. He had personally killed over 100 enemy soldiers, and now he faced the Kulmar Pocket. The Kulmar Pocket was the last piece of French soil the Wehrmacht controlled. Hitler had ordered it held at all costs, and he had sent his best, the 2nd Mountain Division, elite troops, veterans of the brutal winters in Norway, transferred specifically for this offensive. For Company B, the situation wasn't desperate. It was over. Look at the mathematics. In 5 days of constant brutal fighting, Company B had lost 102 men. All officers except Murphy were killed or evacuated from a full strength of 187 men. They were down to 40 effectives. Murphy himself was fighting with a fresh leg wound from shrapnel. He told no one. Private Anthony Abramsky described their condition. We were finished. Done. Most of us hadn't slept in 3 days. Half the guys had frostbite. Our machine guns were freezing up. We tried to dig foxholes. The ground was like iron. January 26, 1945. The dawn was gray and bitter cold. Company B was strung out in a thin line along the edge of the Holtz forest. In front of them, a mile of open frozen ground. They were, as Abramsky said, sitting ducks. Murphy had positioned his only anti-tank capability, 2 M10 tank destroyers. He had his 40 exhausted men, and he had a field telephone line to artillery, his only real hope. At 1 p.m., the German artillery barrage began. Tree bursts, shells exploding in the treetops, showering the frozen ground with a rain of deadly hot steel. It lasted 30 minutes. At 1:40 p.m., the attack came. Private First Class Donald Ekman was the first to see them. You could see the pennants on the antenna of the German tanks. 6 of them, and behind them, Jesus Christ. 250 infantry, all in white snow camouflage, moving across that field like ghosts. Murphy's first action was to call for artillery support, but artillery alone wouldn't stop this. The Germans were too spread out, too numerous, moving too fast. At 600 yards, The M10 tank destroyers opened fire. Their first shots missed. The crews were exhausted, their hands numb from the cold. The return fire from the German tanks was immediate and devastating. An 88mm shell struck the rear M10 squarely in the turret. It burst into flames. The crew scrambled out, running for the woods. The forward M10 trying to move slid sideways into a drainage ditch. Its tracks couldn't find a grip on the frozen ground. Its crew abandoned it and retreated. It was 2:20 p.m. Both tank destroyers were out of action. The German infantry was now closing to within 200 WWII. This was the breaking point, the moment the position would be overrun. This is when Lieutenant Murphy made the decision that would defy all logic. He ordered his remaining 40 men to fall back, to retreat to prepared positions deeper in the woods. "Fall back," he yelled. But he himself didn't retreat. Instead, as his men ran for cover, Lieutenant Murphy ran forward. He ran through the artillery and machine gun fire. He ran towards the burning M10 tank destroyer. The vehicle was fully engulfed in flames at the rear. Black smoke poured from the hull. At any moment, the thousands of rounds of ammunition and 300 gallons of gasoline inside would explode, turning the vehicle into a massive shredded bomb. Murphy didn't hesitate. He climbed onto the back of the burning, exploding tank destroyer and manned its .50 caliber machine gun. From this position, he was a perfect target. A single silhouetted figure standing on top of a bomb, completely exposed to 250 rifles and 6 tanks. Private Abramsky watched from the woods. I saw Lieutenant Murphy climb on top of the burning tank destroyer. It was the greatest display of guts and courage I have ever seen. The .50 caliber Browning is a devastating weapon. In Murphy's hands, it became an instrument of precise destruction. The hunter's eye from the Texas cotton fields took over. For the next hour, this 19-year-old 110 LB boy became a one-man army. He wasn't just firing, he was calculating. He held the field telephone in one hand, calling in artillery strikes. He held the trigger of the .50 cal in the other. He created a wall of steel. Sergeant Elma Broly observed from the wood's edge. The German infantrymen got within 10 yards of Lieutenant Murphy, who killed them in the drawers, in the meadows, in the woods. Wherever he saw them, the German forces, these elite mountain troops, found themselves in an impossible trap. Their tanks, which should have crushed the position in seconds, were now useless. They could not advance without their infantry, and their infantry was being systematically destroyed by a single unseen machine gun, firing from inside a cloud of black smoke. Technical Sergeant Morris Wald, watching from the battalion command post, testified, "Murphy's fire was incredibly effective. He wasn't just spraying bullets, every burst was aimed. He was picking off German infantry like he was at a shooting gallery. I saw him cut down an entire squad that was trying to flank our position. The Germans tried everything. They hit the tank destroyer with shells. Shrapnel tore through Murphy's leg, his second wound of the day. He ignored it. He just kept firing. He just kept calling in artillery. At 3:10 p.m., after 40 minutes of continuous firing, the .50 caliber started to slow down. He was running out of ammunition. The Germans sensed it. They started to rush forward. Murphy grabbed his carbine and started picking them off one by one. The Germans were now just 10 yards away. This was the end. Murphy made his last, most desperate call. He ordered the artillery to fire directly on his own position. The forward observer, Lieutenant Walter Weisfenning, refused. He knew it would mean certain death. Murphy screamed into the phone, "I'm giving you a direct order. Fire on my position now." The first 105mm shells landed 50 yards away. The explosions threw frozen earth and shrapnel in all directions. The German infantry caught in the open were torn apart, but Murphy, exposed on top of the burning vehicle, was also in the impact zone. The combination of his direct fire and the artillery exploding all around him finally broke the German attack. The surviving infantry, perhaps 100 men, turned and ran. The tanks, now without any support, reversed course and withdrew. It was 3:20 p.m. After one impossible hour, the attack was over. Audie Murphy, his uniform scorched, his leg bleeding, finally climbed down from the M10. 10 minutes later, the tank destroyer exploded. He walked calmly back to the wood line where his men waited. According to Private Abramsky, he was scary calm. He asked if they had any casualties, made sure everyone was okay, then sat down, lit a cigarette, and asked for a status report. His hands weren't even shaking. On that day, Audie Murphy killed or wounded an estimated 50 German soldiers. He had alone stopped a combined arms assault by 250 elite troops and 6 tanks. He had saved his company from certain destruction, and he had just secured his name in history. The battlefield was devastating. German bodies lay scattered across the snow-covered fields. The elite 2nd Mountain Division, the veterans of Norway, were in full retreat, their officers unable to rally them for another assault. But perhaps the most shocking part of this story is the silence. In the decades after the war, historians searched the German military archives, the veteran organizations, the personal diaries, looking for the German account of that day. They found almost nothing. A near-complete absence of first-hand reports from the men who attacked Holtz. This silence is the real proof of what Audie Murphy did. The German units involved suffered approximately 50 casualties from Murphy's actions alone. Many witnesses were eliminated. But more than that, the German war machine was built on pride and elite training. The 2nd Mountain Division had fought in Norway, Finland, and on the Eastern Front. They had seen everything, but they had never seen this. The idea that 250 of their best men, supported by 6 tanks, were not just defeated, but humiliated by one 50-kg American boy standing on a burning tank, was a tactical defeat so shameful, they simply erased it. It was incomprehensible. It didn't fit their doctrine. It didn't fit their worldview. It was a fatal flaw in their own logic. The official German war diary for that day tells the lie. It reads, "Attack on American positions near Holtz, repulsed with heavy casualties. Enemy resistance heavier than expected." Heavier than expected. Sue was one man. They had met someone who was simply better at war than they were. And that recognition broke something fundamental in their warrior identity. Their tactical plan was perfect. Their equipment was superior. Their soldiers were elite. And one farm boy with a stupid idea had broken all of it. The hunter had become the hunted. Murphy's stand had consequences far beyond the immediate tactical victory. This wasn't just about saving Company B. This was the big impact. The successful defense of the Badied Forest, the position Murphy refused to give up, broke the back of German resistance in all of Alsace. The German failure to break through meant the Kulmar Pockets days were numbered. Holtzwihr itself, the village they were trying to defend, fell to the Allies the very next day. Within weeks, the entire German bridgehead west of the Rhine had been eliminated, removing 50,000 German troops from the war and freeing Allied forces for the final assault into Germany. The two small farm boy had just changed the map of the war. On June 2nd, 1945, near Salzburg, Austria, Lieutenant General Alexander Patch formally presented 2nd Lieutenant Audie Murphy with the nation's highest military honor, the Medal of Honor. The official citation, typically understated in military documents, struggles to capture the reality of that day. It reads, "He was alone and exposed to German fire from 3 sides, but his deadly fire killed dozens of Germans and caused their infantry attack to waver. For an hour, the Germans tried every available weapon to eliminate 2nd Lieutenant Murphy, but he continued to hold his position. Murphy's own words were, as always, more direct. When asked why he had climbed onto the burning tank destroyer, why he had performed that stupid action, his response was simple. They were killing my friends. He later said, "It was not a heroic act. I figured if one man could do the job, why risk the lives of others?" This was the McKenna mindset, the piano wire fix. It wasn't about glory. It was about seeing a fatal problem and finding a solution. Right now, his military record remains unmatched by any American soldier. He received every combat decoration for valor that the United States Army could award, some of them twice. His 33 decorations included the Medal of Honor, the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, the Legion of Merit, 2 Bronze Stars, and 3 Purple Hearts. He also received 5 decorations from France and Belgium. The boy who was too small to be a Marine had become the most decorated American soldier of World War II. The war in Europe ended. The guns fell silent. Audie Murphy came home. He was a national hero. He was on the cover of Life magazine. He was given parades. He was invited to Hollywood. He became a movie star, starring in over 40 films, including To Hell and Back, where he played himself. To the public, this was the perfect Hollywood ending, the ultimate rags to riches story. The poor Texas farm boy had defeated the Nazis and become a rich and famous star. But this is not where Audie Murphy's story ends. This is where the real war, the missing page, begins. The public saw Audie Murphy, the hero. They did not see the fatal flaw that the war had left inside him. The man who had shown no fear on top of a burning tank was now terrified of the dark. Murphy's post-war struggle with what was then called battle fatigue, we now know as severe post-traumatic stress disorder. He suffered from chronic insomnia, recurring nightmares, and a hypervigilance that led him to sleep with a loaded pistol under his pillow. He was haunted. He wasn't haunted by the men he killed. He was haunted by the men he couldn't save. He was haunted by the faces of his friends. He had survived, but he had never truly left that battlefield. Eventually, he couldn't even sleep in the house. He moved to his garage where he slept with the lights on, because the darkness reminded him of night patrols. "I can't remember when I didn't have nightmares," Murphy wrote. "They became part of my life, like breathing. A demon seemed to have entered my body." His first marriage to the actress, Wanda Hicks, lasted only 16 months. It was destroyed by his PTSD. Hicks later described he was 2 people. During the day, he could be charming, funny, generous, but at night he became someone else. He'd patrol the house with a loaded gun, reliving battles from years earlier. The war had ended for America, but it had never ended for Audie Murphy. He was fighting a new enemy, an invisible one, and it was an enemy he couldn't defeat with a rifle. Despite his own struggles, Murphy became one of the first and most important public advocates for veterans' mental health. In the 1960s, he broke through regulations. He spoke publicly about his nightmares, his insomnia, his demons. This was the stupid action of the post-war era. In a time when battle fatigue was seen as weakness or cowardice, America's greatest hero stood up and said, "I have it." He was once again the man on the front line, seeing the problem the engineers and politicians were ignoring. He wrote for the Saturday Evening Post, "What about the veteran who can't? What about the thousands coming back from Vietnam with the same problems?" He was no longer fighting for Company B. He was fighting for all veterans. But this time he wasn't alone. In 1951, he married Pamela Archer. And this is the other missing page of the Audie Murphy legend. This is the other hero of this story. Pamela was a 31-year-old former airline stewardess, and she saw the 2 men inside Audie, the hero and the demon. And unlike everyone else, she did not run. Pamela Murphy provided the unique insight that the public never saw. Audie carried invisible wounds that never healed. He'd wake up screaming, reliving battles from 20 years earlier, but he never stopped trying to help other veterans. The war never ended for Audie, but he turned his pain into purpose. For 20 years, Pamela stood by him. She was his anchor, his field modification against the chaos in his own mind. She helped him raise 2 sons. She endured the nightmares. She supported his advocacy. She was the crew chief for the hero who was still at war. Then on May 28, 1971, the impossible happened. Audie Murphy, the man who had survived every conceivable horror of war, the man whose statistics said should have died 20 times over on that burning tank, died at age 45, not in battle but in a private plane crash in the mountains of Virginia during a storm. America mourned its greatest hero. But for Pamela Murphy, the real mission was just beginning. Audie had spent his life fighting for his friends. Now Pamela would spend the rest of her life fighting for his. She had seen the fatal flaw of PTSD up close for 20 years, and now she was going to fix it. After Audie's death in 1971, the world discovered another missing page. The most decorated soldier in American history, the man who became a Hollywood star, died in debt. Bad investments and mismanagement by others had left his estate and his wife Pamela with almost nothing. She was a 50-year-old widow with 2 teenage sons to raise and a mountain of her late husband's debts. This was her Kulmar pocket. This was her impossible situation. The world expected her to fade away, a tragic footnote in a hero's story. But they forgot who she was. She was the woman who had stood by Audie Murphy for 20 years. She had faced his demons with him. She was a warrior in her own right. And now she had a new mission. Audie's war was over. Hers was just beginning. She did something that defied all expectation. She didn't write a tell-all book. She didn't sell his medals. Instead, Pamela Murphy, the widow of America's greatest hero, walked into the Solva Veterans Affairs Hospital in Los Angeles and asked for a job. She didn't ask for a high-level position. She didn't use her famous name. She took a job as a simple clerk, a patient liaison. This was her piano wire fix. This was her climbing on the burning tank. For the next 35 years, Pamela Murphy dedicated her life to Audie's other war. She arrived at the hospital every morning, took her small desk, and became a one-woman army for the veterans nobody else would listen to. She was the mechanic who saw the fatal flaw in the system. She saw veterans shattered by Vietnam, suffering from the same battle fatigue that had haunted her husband. She saw them getting lost in the bureaucracy, their files misplaced, their benefits denied, their appointments canceled. These men were the ghosts of her husband, and Pamela Murphy would not abandon them. She became their advocate. She was the piano wire in the broken control cable of the VA system. She used her quiet dignity and the profound moral authority her name carried to cut through the red tape. When a doctor wouldn't see a veteran, she made the call. When a benefit check was lost in the mail, she found it. When a bureaucrat told a veteran no, Pamela Murphy was the one who walked into their office and did not leave until that no became a yes. She treated every single veteran, from the forgotten homeless soldier in the hallway to the decorated colonels, with the same respect. She saw her husband's face, his pain, his struggle in every single one of them. She was Audie's final and most powerful field modification. She wasn't just preserving his memory, she was finishing his mission. The Audie L. Murphy Memorial VA Hospital in San Antonio, Texas, was named in his honor in 1973. But Pamela was his living memorial, a 35-year-long testament to the promise of leave no man behind. But that legacy, that 35-year mission, was only possible because of what happened on that frozen field. It leaves the one final question. How? How did one 110 lb 19-year-old boy with shrapnel in his leg actually do it? It wasn't magic. It wasn't a movie. It was a perfect storm of four factors, the same factors that defined the piano wire fix. A brilliant mechanic, a fatal flaw, a stupid innovation, and a crazy result. The first factor was the weapon. The M2 Browning 50 caliber machine gun, designed by John Browning in 1980 in Anu Adrian Tynant. It was arguably the finest heavy machine gun of the Second World War. Its 50 BMG cartridge could penetrate an inch of armor plate. Each round had the devastating energy to tear a human body apart. It was reliable. It didn't jam in the freezing cold. In the hands of a normal soldier, it was a terrifying weapon of suppression. But in the hands of Audie Murphy, it was a scalpel. He wasn't just spraying and praying. He was aiming. He was using the cold arithmetic. He learned hunting rabbits in Hunt County. He was, as Sergeant Wald testified, picking them off like he was at a shooting gallery. One burst, one target. See a German, eliminate the German. The weapon was perfect, but the man using it was a master. The second factor was the stupid location, that burning M10 tank destroyer. To the Germans, it was a death trap, a bomb. To Murphy, it was the perfect McKenna solution. He understood the hidden truth of the machine. What Murphy knew, and the Germans didn't, was how it was burning. The M10 carried 300 gall of diesel fuel and 51 rounds of 3 and high explosive ammunition stored in the hull. The German 88mm shell had struck the fuel, not the ammunition. The vehicle was a bomb, but the fuse was slow. More importantly, the thick black smoke from the diesel fire provided a perfect smoke screen. The Germans knew the fire was coming from the smoke, but they couldn't get a clear shot at the man inside it. Murphy was essentially fighting from inside a burning fortress that he knew could detonate at any second. It was the ultimate stupid action, and it was tactical genius. The third factor was the force multiplier. This is the part everyone misses. Murphy wasn't just a one-man army. He was a one-man fire direction center. While firing the 50 cal with one hand, he was holding the field telephone to his ear with the other. He was calling in 105mm howitzer shells from his own artillery miles away. He was multiplying his firepower by 1,000. The Germans weren't just running from his machine gun. They were running from the sky, which was exploding all around them, directed by the man inside the smoke. This is what finally and most desperately led to his command. Fire on my position. He was willing to sacrifice himself to use his last and greatest weapon, the artillery, to finish the job. And the fourth and most important factor was the hunter. Military scientists have tried to calculate the odds given the 250 infantry, the 6 tanks, the machine guns, the mortars. It's estimated that over 10,000 rounds were fired at Murphy's position during that hour. Statistical models suggest he should have been hit 15 to 20 times. He was only hit once by shrapnel from an exploding shell. This wasn't just luck. This was the uncanny skill of the Texas rabbit hunter. He understood not being seen. He understood one shot, one kill. He had, as he said, become a killing machine. Dr. Dave Geeman, an expert on combat psychology, offered this analysis. Murphy represented a perfect storm. He had the technical skills from hunting, the motivation from poverty, the emotional detachment from early trauma, and most importantly, a protective instinct for his men that overrode his own instinct for self-preservation. He wasn't fighting for America. He wasn't fighting for glory. He was fighting for his friends. That is the story of the stupid action that changed the war. The too small boy who was rejected by the Marines. The fatal flaw of a 110 LVB kid who became the hidden weapon of the U.S. Army. The piano wire fix of climbing on a burning tank that led to the crazy result of stopping an entire German army. His true legacy, the big impact, is twofold. The first is that he broke the stigma of PTSD because Audie Murphy said he had it. because America's greatest hero admitted he was haunted. Thousands of other veterans, for the first time, felt they could ask for help. He gave them the permission to be human. The second is Pamela Murphy. She worked at that VA hospital until she was 87 years old, finally retiring in 2007. She never remarried. When she died in 2010, she was buried next to him at Arlington National Cemetery. The mechanic reunited with her pilot. The world saw a hero. Pamela saw a man. The recruiters saw a fatal flaw. The Army found a secret weapon. The Germans saw an impossible situation. Audie Murphy saw a problem that needed fixing. It all comes back to that one fact, the one that makes this the greatest missing page of the war. The 110 Level B farm boy, who was too small to be a soldier, became the man who stopped an army to save his friends. And in doing so, he and the wife who loved him saved thousands more long after the guns fell silent.